For if we've been united with him in a death like his, we will certainly be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know that our old self was crucified with him, so that the body of sin might be destroyed, and we might no longer be enslaved to sin. For whoever has died is freed from sin. But if we have died with Christ, we believe that we will also live with him. We know that Christ, being raised from the dead, will never die again. Death no longer has dominion over him. The death he died to sin once for all, but the life he lives to God. So you must also consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus. Jesus said, "Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And whoever does not take up the cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it."
One of my favorite jazz musicians is a gentleman named Ornette Coleman. And if you've listened to his music, it is a little bit out there. This isn't big band stuff, though. Sometimes he does play with something he calls a big band, but it's not what you would think of swing dancing to necessarily. And part of the appeal of Ornette is that he revolutionized the way that jazz was played, and in fact, he even coined this term for the way he played called harmolodics, some kind of blend of harmony and melody together. And in Ornette's mind, that was the way that music worked. In fact, he thought everybody thought music worked that way, but that wasn't the case. There's a story about Ornette where he realized that the innovations that he was making just didn't fit the system that everybody else had constructed for how music worked. He was living with a composer who had identified him at a very early age as having a great talent. And so this composer had moved him into his home and had begun to give Ornette private theory and composition lessons to go along with the great playing aptitude that he was displaying in his small ensemble playing already. And Ornette lived there for several months, dutifully taking his lessons every day and getting up and going and listening to lectures about tonal harmony and counterpoint and voice leading and all these things that you do in theory class. And then one day, after being in the house for 3 or 4 months having these lessons every day, in the middle of a lesson, while this composer was explaining some finer detail of music theory to Ornette, Ornette jumped up from his seat and he ran to the bathroom. And he was violently sick. And he couldn't get control of himself. And so this made the host think something Ornette ate or he's picked up a bug from somewhere has got him upset and we need to go and care for him. And so they got Ornette after he started to recover from his sickness and gaining his strength back, and they got him into bed and they started to hydrate him. And his host asked him, "What do you think it was that you ate? Or where do you think you picked up this bug?" And Ornette said, "I don't think it's a bug. In fact, I think I know exactly what happened." And his host said, "What was that?" And young Ornette, identified as just a wunderkind of jazz, looks at him and he says, "I don't know why it took me this long, but in that moment of that lecture today, I realized that the way I thought music works is not the way anybody else thinks that music works. I had it all wrong. Well, fortunately for us as jazz lovers, we are glad that he got it wrong. We are glad that he learned to play in a new way, kind of unconstrained by the system that was around him that may have put boundaries on him that we are better off not having. But also, that moment of revelation was so disorienting that it set him on a new path. And it set him on one to develop something called harmolodics, which he hadn't had before. This passage in Romans today, I hope, will be one of those moments for you. Because the way Paul describes how good works, how sin, and how resurrection work, they are not the way that we usually believe that they work. Paul says very clearly, if you've died with Christ, in baptism, you are no longer enslaved to sin. That's not the way most of us live our lives. Some may have egos and think that most of the things we do are good. Or we don't think that we're generally sinful. But I would say most find that when they struggle with sin, they beg to be released from the enslavement of it. But Paul says, without qualification, if you've died in Christ, you've died to sin. That's the death side of our resurrection faith. It is denying ourselves and taking up our cross, as we heard in that gospel passage. It is losing our life. That's step number one. But that is not the step where we get stuck. The step where we're supposed to get stuck is living to Christ. The step where we get stuck is being raised again. Now, I'm not trying to say, though some have said over the years that becoming a Christian means you don't struggle with sins any longer. But I do think that we need to think about and live into a reality where the good works that we do are the resurrection part of our life. And then when we encounter those areas that seem to enslave us in sin, we have confidence to say, those need to die. Because this is an ongoing cycle, as Paul will make clear in a few chapters. You're dying and you're rising. You're dying and you're rising. And you're constantly discovering things you need to lose. And you're constantly being blown away by what you find. Because ours is a faith not of destruction and salvation. Ours is a faith of losing and finding. And God is the great finder. And we, on an individual level, we get to be both. We get to lose and we get to find. We get to die and we get to be raised again. And that process, that iterative process of having that happen over and over and over again, is what makes us holy. It's what makes us sanctified. It's what makes us more alive all the time and less dead. So the trick for us, the way we need to be reoriented, is not the grasping to every little thing that we think currently makes us alive, but be willing to give it up, even to the extreme way that Jesus says in this passage, father and mother. But father and mother, those are easy to give up sometimes. Losing your whole life might be harder. We need to be prepared to lose. We need to be prepared to die, participate in Christ's death, which is what we've done in baptism. We need to lose to find. We need to die to live.